Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
When I was a kid, I dreamed about exploring the oceans from an undersea lab far away from the distractions of the world above. Now that might seem like a science fiction fantasy, even less likely than a space station.
As it turns out, a bunch of scientists and engineers thought an undersea lab might be a great way to study the ocean and life in the ocean. With funding from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, they created the Aquarius Reef Base near Key Largo, Florida. My childhood dream has become a reality. Here, 6 people can live and work for weeks at a time without ever going to the surface. Sure, it seems really cool, but to truly understand how this underwater habitat benefits the study of the ocean, you really need to understand a little bit about the physiology of scuba diving. Scuba gear has given humans the ability to explore the shallow parts of the ocean. We can hover weightless like fish, breathing underwater for as long as our scuba tank lasts, which is generally about an hour.
But even with an unlimited scuba tank, we can't stay down too long because of something called decompression sickness, or the bends.
When I submerge underwater, the increasing water pressure at depth pushing in on my lungs won't allow me to breathe unless my regulator supplies air to me at the same pressure as the water around me. The deeper I go, the more water pressure there is, and therefore the air I'm breathing is at a higher pressure too, pushing out at the same pressure as the water pushing in. Since about 79% of the atmosphere is composed of nitrogen and our bodies can't metabolize nitrogen, all this high-pressured nitrogen builds up in my muscles and other tissues when I dive. If I stay underwater for too long, too much nitrogen builds up in my body.
When I come up to the lower ambient pressure at the surface, it can form bubbles in my blood, sort of like this. Those bubbles get stuck in arteries and veins, blocking circulation and causing great pain. But what if I didn't have to come back here to the lower ambient pressure at the surface after a dive? What if I could stay at a high ambient pressure by living in an undersea lab? Well, I could scuba dive all day long and I'd never get the bends. That's the idea behind the Aquarius Reef Base.
The Blue World team has been invited to film an Aquarius mission, so cameraman Tim and I have come to beautiful Key Largo, Florida for an adventure. We load the Aquarius support boat and join the staff as we depart from the dock for a 45-minute ride out to the Aquarius. Once we clear the canal and reach the ocean, we still have a few miles to go. The Florida Keys have huge areas of shallow coral reefs before the seafloor drops off into deeper water. So, Aquarius is located a bit further from shore than you might expect. Our ride takes us over miles of beautiful coral reef. I can hardly contain my excitement to see this astonishing underwater habitat. At last, we reach the life support buoy. This floating structure contains generators and compressors supplying power and air to Aquarius below. We tie up our boat to the life support buoy. Aquarius is sitting on the sea floor 60 feet beneath our boat. Tim and I suit up and prepare to not only see Aquarius up close, but go inside and meet the team of divers called Aquanauts, with whom we'll be working for the week.
Well, I'm all geared up and ready to go. This is so cool. You have got to see this.
As soon as I hit the ocean, I can see Aquarius directly beneath me in the clear water. It's almost like a submarine that doesn't move. But unlike a submarine, the pressure inside Aquarius is the same as the pressure outside. So even though there's an open hatch at the bottom of the habitat, water doesn't go in. This allows people to go in and out of Aquarius as much as they like.
Which is totally awesome! So this is it, the Aquarius. Amazing.
I can come right in through an open hole in the floor, and yet the water stays out. That's cool. Now, time for a shower. You have to shower before you go inside the Aquarius because really they don't want salt water and everything. I mean, we might be underwater, but this is civilized. So the Aquarius, you can think of it as basically like a big school bus with no seats in it. It's sort of like a long tube, and everything is spread throughout that tube. At this end, behind this power door, is the front porch, and that's where I came inside. We like to keep that closed because it's quite humid in there, and it's air conditioned in here. Now the next feature you'll find right inside the front door here is the bathroom. There's your bathroom. You get your privacy curtain. You know, it's a pretty small bathroom, but gets the job done. And of course, right across over here, a sink. And of course, some laboratory equipment, you know, just in case you need to do some biological studies. And then we come down a little further. We have a computer. Well, you got to be able to get on the internet even when you're underwater. I mean, come on. So here in the middle of the Aquarius, we have the kitchen, or what you would call on a boat, the galley. So if you come in here, we've got the sink, and we have a sort of a place to eat, a kitchen table, if you will, and a picture window. But unlike your picture window at home, this picture window looks out on a coral reef with fish swimming by. Where's the fish? Come here, fishies. And the last part, down here at the far end, this would be sort of like the back of the school bus. You have 6 bunks all stacked up together. You can see there's not a lot of space in here. In fact, if you're sleeping, you only have about 1.5 feet from your head to the next bunk up. It's pretty tight, but it's cozy and it's dry.
And you can't beat the view out the window at the foot of the bed.
So now you might be wondering, what do you eat down here? Well, they eat sort of like astronauts. It's freeze-dried food. If you're a camper, you might have used some of this stuff. You rip the package open, you put hot water in it, you let it sit for a while, and then you can eat it right out of the package. They don't really have a lot of facilities for cooking. They have a microwave and they have hot water, and that's about it. There's no stove, there's no oven. Some of the food that gets brought down in very tight containers gets compressed with the pressure down here. So this is something that was fully inflated at the surface, but once it gets brought down here to 50 feet, the pressure in here squishes it down, and that's what it ends up looking like. And you can feel the pressure all around you, even though you don't really feel like you're under pressure. The air that we're breathing is a little bit more dense because it's compressed. And several things happen. My voice sounds a little funny to me, but on top of that, it's really hard to whistle. There we go.
Even though the scientists are out scuba diving, there are always 2 technicians in Aquarius maintaining the life support, fixing little things that break, monitoring the various systems, and keeping track of the divers. While technician Mark Hulsbeck is giving me an introduction to the life support systems, we're being watched by someone on shore. There are cameras all over Aquarius. They send their signals through a cable up to the life support buoy, where the signal is beamed wirelessly back to the antenna on shore. Here at the watch desk, another technician monitors activity, electrical systems, and life support. This is an additional layer of safety. If there's some kind of emergency, help will be on the way immediately. Meanwhile, down at Aquarius, I have to leave. I can only stay a little more than an hour because I have to return to the lower pressure at the surface or I'll have decompression sickness. The biologists, however, are out working on the reef conducting their study of reef sponges. They wear double scuba tanks so they can carry a lot of air. Even though they dive 100 feet deep, they can spend hours and hours doing their research, utterly unconcerned about such trivial things as decompression sickness. They can spend as much time as they like on the reef because they don't need to go to the lower pressure of the surface after the dive. Instead, these aquanauts will return to Aquarius. When their scuba tanks get low, the aquanauts head over to the nearest gazebo. It's sort of like an oasis for divers. It's filled with air. Inside, they can take their masks off, talk to each other, and fill their scuba tanks from a high-pressure hose from Aquarius. After an air fill, the aquanauts can go back out on the reef for a few more hours. Eventually, though, they get hungry and come back to Aquarius for lunch.
The scientists are still down there. It's hard to believe they can stay for a whole week, but I can only stay for an hour.
The next day, I have another hour to spend in Aquarius, so I go during lunch to meet these sponge-studying aquanauts.
What is it that you can do here that you can't do from the surface? And why do you gotta go through all this?
We have about 6 different projects going on right now, but one of the largest projects is that we go to the same sponges every year, and we have, each one has a tag, so we know which one's which, and we go back and we see which ones are alive, how well they're doing, and really that we have over 900 sponges that we visit every year, and it just takes so long that we really need a lot of bottom time. And like this morning we did a 6-hour dive and we did, I think, 1 plot, but if we were to do that from boats from the surface, that would have taken us probably 6 to 10 dives.
After lunch, the aquanauts gear back up and head out for another few hours' work. They may swim quite a ways to their research site, but they have safety lines to lead them back home to Aquarius. Aquarius isn't just a home for aquanauts. Over the years, coral and sponges have grown all over the structure. It's been transformed into an artificial reef with thousands of fish taking up residence. They're all used to divers. One of the resident tarpon comes right up to my camera for a close look. Cameraman Tim investigates a purple coloration on the hull of Aquarius, only to be attacked by an angry Sergeant Major, a kind of damselfish. The purple coloration is an egg nest. The tiny eggs are stuck to the hull by the female and guarded by the male, and he's not happy. Aquarius is home to fish as well as people. While the marine residents have all they need, the humans inside need constant supplies from the surface. Drinking water is brought down each day by surface support divers. Air gets pumped down all the time by the life support buoy overhead. It continually overflows out the bottom of the wet porch so the air inside stays fresh. If the pumps in the life support buoy failed, there's a huge supply of air in reserve tanks next to Aquarius. Getting dry things like food, cameras, and towels down to Aquarius presents a bit more of a challenge, but the team came up with a brilliantly simple solution. It looks like a giant pressure cooker.
So this is a modified paint pot. So they apparently don't use them anymore. They don't make them.
This heavy steel container has a valve on top for equalizing internal pressure and 8 strong clamps to keep it closed.
So when we close the valve up top, shut everything down, tighten it down all these dogs all the way around. Yeah.
Depending on how heavy the stuff inside is, a diver may be able to handle it alone, or an air-filled lift bag might be required to keep it from sinking. Once the pot is delivered, the valve is opened to bring it up to the same internal pressure as Aquarius, and the clamps come off. With any luck, everything is dry. In the last 10 years, only one has leaked.
Thank you, Brad.
You're welcome, Otter.
At the end of their week in Aquarius, the aquanauts must go through one long decompression to bring their bodies back to surface pressure. They rest for about 18 hours, watching Blue World DVDs, of course, while the pressure inside Aquarius is brought back down to that of the surface. For a few hours, they wear masks and breathe pure oxygen. Aquarius serves as one huge decompression chamber. In spite of all the effort required to keep Aquarius running, this underwater lab is actually not very expensive to run, about $10,000 per mission day. That might sound like a lot, but it's actually inexpensive when the number of diving hours are all added up. 4 scientific divers can rack up 32 to 40 combined hours underwater each day. We know very little about the oceans just because they're so difficult to study. But we do know that the oceans are incredibly important to our planet, our atmosphere, and all life on Earth. The more we know about the oceans, the better we can protect and nurture the entire Earth's environment. Aquarius Reef Base is the world's only underwater research station serving on the front lines of cutting-edge ocean research. And with continued funding, it will be helping scientists study the ocean for many years to come.
Don't go away. Jonathan is about to explore the incredible world of skates and rays.
You know me, I love sharks. It doesn't matter if it's a big shark like the great white or the whale shark, or if it's a small one like the white-tip reef shark. Sharks are cool.
Skates and rays are the evolutionary cousins of sharks. They're contained within the same class, Chondrichthyes, along with the sharks, but they're in their own subdivision known as the badoids.
The badoids share many characteristics with sharks, such as the cartilaginous skeleton, the lack of a swim bladder, and multiple gill slits. In fact, they're so similar that you almost could think of them as flat sharks. But there are some flat sharks. The wobbegong shark, for example, actually looks more like a ray than a shark because it's flattened and tends to lie on the bottom.
So how do you tell a ray from a flat shark?
First of all, skates and rays are always flat. Biologists call them dorso-ventrally flattened. But unlike a dorso-ventrally flattened shark, a skate or ray has wing-like pectoral fins that are just an extension of its body, making it look a bit like a flying carpet. Or maybe if you squint a little, a bat, hence the name badoids. Also, skates and rays have their gills on the underside of their bodies, while a shark, even a flattened shark, has them on the side. One of the most well-known rays is the stingray. This is a southern stingray common in the Caribbean. It gets its name from its stinger, a sharp, venomous spine at the base of the tail. This powerful weapon is used to defend the animal from its most feared predator, sharks.
Wait a minute! Sharks eating their own evolutionary cousins? That is so uncivilized.
The southern stingray feeds on animals that live in the sand, like mollusks and worms. The stingray's mouth is on its underside, just like its gills. It blows water into the sand to excavate around prey, then slurps it up with powerful suction. Because it feeds in the sand, the southern stingray tends to swim close to the bottom, though it certainly doesn't have to. But this poses a problem with breathing.
A shark breathes by taking water in through its mouth and then sending it back out through the gills to extract oxygen from the water.
However, since the stingray has its mouth on its underside and swims so close to the bottom, you would think that the stingray would get a lot of sand into its gills. And you would be right, except for one thing. On top of the stingray's head are a pair of openings called spiracles. They're kind of like big nostrils. Instead of breathing in through its mouth, the stingray breathes in through the spiracles on top of its head and away from the sand. Sharks have spiracles too, but they're really small on most sharks and they can't breathe through them. The only sharks that breathe through their spiracles are, you guessed it, flattened bottom dwellers like the wobbegong. Notice how this ray swims by flapping its wings and gliding along just over the sand. By comparison, meet the little skate, common in the waters of New England. It looks just like a miniature stingray, but it's a skate because it has no stinger. Although it can swim by flapping its wings, it often scoots along the bottom by repeatedly pushing off the bottom with its pelvic fins. Kind of like riding a skateboard. This type of locomotion has been termed punting. Most badoids have pelvic fins like this, but only a few use them to move in this way.
And if you think that's weird, check out this strange-looking ray.
The torpedo ray doesn't look much different from any other ray when it's lying on the bottom. But when it gets up to swim, it has a vertical tail fin like a shark. Instead of flapping its wing-like pectoral fins, it swishes its tail back and forth to swim. And that's not even the weirdest thing about this unique ray. The torpedo ray is also known as the electric ray because it can produce 50 volts of electricity to shock its prey. Most rays can't electrocute their dinner into submission. The spotted eagle ray spends a lot of time soaring through the water like the eagle for which it's named. But look closely. It has a shovel-shaped face for digging around in the seafloor. It's a bottom feeder, just like the stingray.
And look here! Not just one, but 3 stingers!
Another ray that likes to swim up off the bottom, the manta ray. If ever there was an animal that looked like a flying carpet, this is it. Unlike most other rays, this animal eats plankton. It swims through the water with its mouth wide open, allowing the tiny plankton to go into its mouth and get stuck on comb-like filters on its gills. Then it swallows them down. Mantas don't have spines for protection. They rely partly on their large size to deter predators. But they can jump pretty far out of the water to escape predators too. Sometimes that doesn't help. This manta has a bite cleanly taken out of it by a shark. Ouch, that's gotta hurt. It probably happened when this ray was much smaller. Manta rays are ovoviviparous, meaning that they produce eggs that hatch internally. Baby manta rays emerge from their mother alive and swimming. All rays use this reproductive strategy. However, skates, like the little skate, are oviparous. They lay eggs. This is the egg of a skate. The mother produced 5 to 15 of them. They're laid on the sand and given no parental protection. Inside the egg, a baby skate develops for up to a year depending on the water temperature. Finally, the day comes when the baby skate slowly forces its way out of the egg case and swims away. Even a newborn knows to camouflage itself quickly to avoid predators. Skates and rays are a diverse group. Not all badoids look like the typical ray. This animal's called a saw shark or sawfish. It looks more like a shark, but it's a ray. Don't believe me? Where are its gill slits?
A shark's gills would be here, but they're underneath. And look, it's breathing through large spiracles.
The sawfish uses its saw to hunt by swinging it back and forth in the sand, impaling soft-bellied creatures on the teeth. So, skates and rays are a diverse group of animals with many adaptations to survive. And while they're not as well known as their cousins the sharks, they're every bit as fascinating.
Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
Most people, when they think about the Bahamas, imagine sandy beaches, blue water, and colorful coral reefs. What they generally don't think about is this: limestone. The Bahamas are islands built on a base of limestone, the skeletons of ancient coral reefs accumulated over millions of years. Bahamas limestone often looks like Swiss cheese because over thousands of years, slightly acidic rainwater has dissolved holes in it. Sometimes those holes get quite large and fill with water. Hence, they become what are known in the Bahamas as blue holes. Many of these blue holes have amazing cave systems within them. The Blue World team has traveled to the island of Andros in the Bahamas to explore one of the most famous blue holes in the world, Stargate. Our home away from home? Small Hope Bay Lodge on North Andros. They have a beautiful beach, an idyllic tropical location for rest and relaxation. Hey, I'll admit it, I don't mind Blue World assignments in the Bahamas. I might even just take a little nap in a hammock outside the dive shop. But not for long, because I have a meeting with Jeff Birch, the owner of Small Hope Bay Lodge, who's taking us diving.
So Jeff, tell me, where are we going for this dive?
Well, we got to get down here to South Andros, to Congo Town, because Stargate is just south of that. And of course, these bites go all the way through the island. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave Small Hope, which is right here. We're going to drive to the airport, and we're going to jump in the plane, and then we're going to fly on down here, all the way down, crossing the bights. You're going to see some blue holes along the way, straight to Congo Town.
How long of a flight is that?
Yeah, about 25 minutes. And then after we get here, we'll offload and we'll catch a ride up to Stargate.
Sounds great. I can't wait.
Oh man, it's going to be great. Absolute adventure. It's going to be great.
Early the next morning as the sun rises, cameraman Tim, Todd, and I get our gear ready for an early departure. We have a long day ahead, and it starts with a ride to the airport in the back of a pickup truck loaded with gear. At the airport, We come to the conclusion that we have way too much gear to cram it all into a Cessna 172 along with ourselves, so Jeff decides to make 2 trips down south. We load all our scuba gear into the plane along with cameraman Tim for the first trip.
Good to know you.
Well, thanks for dropping us at the airport and leaving us here.
Hopefully, Jeff will be back for me and Todd, and the camera gear, in an hour or so. Jeff is a man of many talents. Not only is he the owner of Small Hope Bay Lodge and a dive instructor, but he's also a pilot with over 40 years' experience flying around the Bahamas. When you run a hotel in a remote place like Andros, an airplane is practically a necessity. For Jeff, his airplane is like a car to many people. He and cameraman Tim are off on the first leg of our adventure, delivering the scuba gear to South Andros, which is only accessible by plane or boat. But it's too far by boat for a single day. So, in spite of a strong breeze, flying is the only practical way to reach Stargate. The 25-minute flight takes Jeff and Tim over the beautiful and remote landscape and coastal ocean of Andros Island. Soon they land on South Andros. At the Congo Town Airport, they unload the scuba gear from the airplane. That's a lot of gear for a small plane. But Jeff does this kind of thing all the time. It's part of being a bush pilot. Soon he's back in the air, on his way back north to pick up me and Todd. We're just sitting around at the North Andros Airport watching the clouds roll in and wondering what the weather will bring. It's looking a little ominous. Jeff lands under a graying sky and the first droplets of impending rain. We load the rest of the gear and we're off. Looking out the window, I can see the Guardian Blue Hole, where we dove last time we visited Andros. But then things get a little exciting. We head directly into a huge rainstorm. Rain is pelting the airplane. We can't see anything out the windshield. I've seen better visibility underwater. Fortunately, it's not long before we land safely in South Andros to meet up with cameraman Tim.
Man, that was a wild ride.
With all of our team and gear finally in South Andros, we can load it all into a van and head out to Stargate. I'm not sure exactly what I was expecting, but Stargate turns out to be practically in the middle of a neighborhood near Congo Town. It even has a sign. We park the van as close as we can, and Jeff points out an interesting formation.
That's it. Stargate fault line right there. See it?
Jeff is pointing out a crack in the limestone, sometimes called a fault or a fracture. It's actually part of a series of fractures stretching more than 10 miles, formed during the last ice age when sea levels were lower and stresses within the rock caused some of it to break. Deep underground, this fracture is filled with water, and we're about to dive inside it.
Look, I'm spanning the fault. It's very impressive. Well, you're not impressed now, but you wait. You will be impressed when we're diving under it.
But before we can dive, we still have another task ahead of us, hauling all the gear to the Stargate entrance.
All right, good. Are we ready to rock and roll? Let's carry. I still got another hand. Here, I'll take another leg.
I carry this from the...
All right.
Here, right?
And you know what that means, hoofing it on foot through the forest.
Halfway.
It's not a long walk, and there's a clear trail, but you can really appreciate how heavy scuba gear is when you have to hike it through the woods. Hiding in the forest, the entrance to Stargate offers up a little surprise. The water is more than 20 feet down inside the hole. Jeff gives us a dive briefing and goes over how we will conduct the dive.
We're going to go down, and then it's fresh water here, and you have the mixing zone.
Having limited access to the water, we have to lower our gear down on ropes. It's not the gear I'm worried about, it's me. Once the gear is down, we start suiting up for the dive. It's been a lot of work to get this far, and I can't wait to see what Stargate has to show us.
Voila. Sir, my pleasure.
I appreciate it mucho. This is Fetty's gear.
So you're going to demonstrate the proper technique to throw yourself off this cliff.
Throw.
And survive. Survive.
Yes.
The near death-defying height.
I will try.
Okay. Can you survive? Yay! He's alive!
After Jeff shows us how it's done, Todd goes next.
Nicely done. Okay, comes the camera.
Lowering my expensive underwater camera and lighting system down into the water with a rope makes me more than a little nervous.
This is the most ridiculous way to put a camera in the ocean.
After Todd grabs my camera for me, it's my turn to jump in. I'm a little excited and a little nervous, but there's no turning back now. It's actually pretty fun, but I'm not sure how we get back out. Cameraman Tim joins us and we start heading down through the greenish water. Jeff leads us down into the weird, swirly halicline, a layer where the fresh water at the surface mixes with the salt water below. Jeff points out ancient coral, clearly identifiable. This is the stuff that makes up most of the limestone on the island. As I examine the limestone carefully, I can clearly see star coral and brain coral. The overhanging walls of the cavern are covered in flowstone and stalactites. Todd backlights a stalactite to show its shape. Flowstone is a type of formation formed by flowing water in a dry cave, leaving behind delicate limestone formations that look like molten wax on the side of a candle. This formation took thousands of years to form. We follow Jeff into a crack in the wall at about 80 feet. As we go deeper, the water gets clearer and clearer. There's a safety line for us to follow if we need it. It points the way out if we get lost or lose our lights. Todd is swimming ahead of me, lighting up the cave with powerful LED lights. Looking down, I can see the bottom of the cave at 100 feet, but as we progress down this narrow passageway, the bottom is dropping out of sight. It drops to 200 feet, way too deep for us today. We stay near the top of the passageway to keep as shallow as possible. The walls of the cave are decorated in all directions with beautiful and delicate flowstone. The whole place looks like an ornately decorated wedding cake covered in frosting. It's hard to believe that during the last ice age, when sea levels were much lower, this massive chasm was dry and filled with air. Dripping water from rain up above made all these fantastic decorations. Todd stops to point out a huge flowstone formation. I've never seen anything like it. Everywhere I look, my jaw drops, and I'm actually having a hard time knowing where to point my camera. Next, we swim into a huge space where the walls bow outward. The water is so clear that the divers look like astronauts hovering in space. Only their bubbles betray the presence of water. Remember that crack in the ground up above? Well, right now, our dive team is about 120 feet directly underneath it. That tiny little fault line I stood across opens up into this massive submerged chasm. Soon we approach the end of the tunnel. We reach a place where the rocks have fallen in and blocked the passageway. This is where we turn around and head back. As we head back, the water is filled with sinking particles dislodged from the ceiling by our rising air bubbles on the way in. This is an excellent time to concentrate on filming close-ups of the delicate formations on the wall, such as these exquisite stalactites that look like icicles of stone. Jeff points out an incredible flowstone formation that Todd helps me film using his lights. This formation is so thin that light passes through it like a lampshade. Have you ever seen a rock so thin that light passes through it? Because it's thin, it's very fragile. Todd is careful not to actually touch it. That is so cool. Soon we reach the entrance and make our way out of the fault and back into the cavern where the water is green. We ascend slowly back up through the swirly halicline. We stop at 20 feet where we must undergo 15 minutes of decompression before we can surface. Daylight is tantalizingly close. At last we surface, thrilled with an amazing dive. And now, all our gear has to be hauled back up on a rope. Getting ourselves out of the water is another trick altogether.
That was one of the most amazing dives of my entire life. But unfortunately now I have to climb this to get out of the water. All right.
A wooden pallet and a thin rope holding it in place comprise my ladder to freedom. I just hope this rickety contraption doesn't break.
Well, this isn't too bad. And just climb out. That has got to be the most work I've ever done for a dive, but it was so worth it. It was totally worth it. Oh, I feel like a goat.
So the Blue World team spent the whole day hauling gear by airplane, truck, and foot to reach this remote hole in the ground. It doesn't seem all that special from the surface, but the dive showed me an incredible world of delicate flowstone formations inside a massive chasm filled with crystal clear water. Quite simply, magnificent. Every time I think I've seen it all, I see something new like this and realize there's a lot more to discover in the Blue World.
Don't go away. Jonathan is about to shed some light on one of the simplest sea creatures, the sponge.
When people think of a sponge, they usually imagine something like this. A cleaning sponge for washing the dishes. Or for washing the car. Cleaning sponges are synthetic these days. But they used to come from the ocean. Back in the days before we had synthetic sponges for housework, cleaning sponges did come from the ocean. They were harvested by hard hat divers walking along the ocean floor in heavy weighted boots with a rake-like tool to pluck the sponges off the bottom. It was a dangerous and difficult job. Bagfuls of sponges were lifted to the boat above. Immediately, the crew set to work cleaning the sponges. Then they were hung to air dry. After days or weeks at sea, when the boat was full of sponges, they were taken to shore where they were auctioned to the highest bidder. Finally, they were trimmed, sorted, and sold to the public. Natural sponges are still harvested in nearly the same way today, but the synthetic sponge has spared the lives of countless ocean sponges. While an ocean sponge looks something like a weird plant, it's actually an animal. In fact, sponges are among the simplest multicellular animals on Earth. They live on the bottom of the ocean, attached to a surface and never moving because they can't walk or swim. Some are quite colorful, while others are drab. They also come in all shapes and sizes. There are tube sponges, vase sponges, barrel sponges, rope sponges, encrusting sponges, and many other types. Sponges live from the frigid waters of the Arctic and Antarctic to the tropics. On many coral reefs, sponges dominate the seafloor and the drop-off. One of the most common sponges on coral reefs is the barrel sponge. Barrel sponges grow to epic proportions, getting larger than a person. Although sponges can't walk or swim, they can feed. They do it by filtering tiny plankton from the water. A sponge is covered with small pores called ostia, which lead to a system of internal canals and eventually out to one or more larger holes called oscula. Within the canals of the sponge, chambers are lined with specialized cells called choanocytes, or collar cells. The collar cells have a sticky funnel-shaped collar and a hair-like whip called a flagellum. The collar cells serve two purposes. First, they beat their flagella back and forth like fans to move water through the sponge. The water brings in nutrients and oxygen while it carries out waste and carbon dioxide. Second, the sticky collars of the collar cells pick up tiny bits of planktonic food brought in with the water. Sponges are very effective filter feeders since they're able to capture and eat particles as small as bacteria as well as larger particles. They might not look like they're doing much, but a simple demonstration shows how effectively sponges can pump water. On a reef in the Caribbean, I make a dive with a syringe filled with a non-toxic dye called fluorescein. By squirting it around the base of some sponges, we can observe how the water is moving by watching what the dye does. Within only seconds, the dye is pumped through the sponges along with the water. As you can see, a sponge is a pretty good water pump and also a good strainer. Any plankton that goes in with the water won't come back out through the osculum. Tube sponges are even more spectacular to observe. They pump the dye so furiously that they look like a collection of miniature smokestacks. The ultimate test is a hefty barrel sponge. What will a big monster like this do? It takes a few seconds for the dye to work its way through the sponge. Wait for it. But then it pours out like smoke from a chimney. That's pretty good pumping from those tiny little collar cells. Since sponges can't get together to reproduce, they spawn in a way similar to coral. The sperm is released into the water column by the male sponge. It finds its way to the female sponges where fertilization occurs internally. Eventually, the planktonic larvae are released from the female sponge and float around in the water column as plankton for only a few days. Then they settle down and start growing. Sponges don't have many predators. There's not much nutritional value in a sponge, and they're hard to digest. Hence, very few animals can eat sponges. But something was clearly eating this sponge. A sea turtle is the culprit. Sea turtles are one of the principal predators of sponges, along with a few species of fish and some invertebrates like nudibranchs. Sponges might not be very exciting, and they certainly don't have much personality, but they're an ancient animal that has been living in the oceans for at least 500 million years. They can't crawl around or swim, but they're very good at reproducing and feeding themselves by pumping water. So, chances are sponges will continue to populate the oceans longer than people will populate the Earth.